Have you ever felt like someone won an argument, not because they were right, but because you stayed silent? But what if that silence wasn't weakness? What if it was the beginning of something far more powerful? In a world obsessed with proving, performing, and persuading, we forget the quiet strength of restraint. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that true mastery isn't found in overpowering others, but in choosing when not to speak. Because silence, when anchored in self-possession, isn't absence, it's presence. This video isn't about clever comebacks or verbal tricks. It's about learning how to let your silence speak louder than any argument, how to unsettle, disarm, and outmaneuver without ever raising your voice. If you've ever felt unseen, underestimated, or overpowered, this is for you. Stay with me. What comes next may shift how you understand power forever. Number 1. The illusion of verbal victory. Have you ever walked away from a conversation not with satisfaction, but with a knot in your throat and the quiet ache of defeat, despite having said everything you wanted to? It's a strange feeling. You spoke your truth, yet it felt like something was taken from you. Maybe you've been in rooms filled with loud voices, people who interrupt and mock, cloaking their arrogance in faux confidence. Maybe you've told yourself that staying silent is weak, that not defending yourself is surrender, that if you don't react, you've lost. But what if all of that is an illusion? The Stoics, masters of inner strength and stillness, taught that true power rarely speaks. Epictetus warned us, "It is not he who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but your opinion that these things are insulting." In other words, your reaction, not their words, determines your strength. In today's noisy world, many believe that dominance comes from speech. We're taught to defend ourselves, to explain, to win arguments as if every encounter is a battlefield. But the wise know otherwise. Nature reveals a deeper law. The wolf doesn't bark, it watches. The sea doesn't argue, it waits. And the strongest trees don't shout to prove their roots. They simply remain. Silence is not submission. It is not weakness. It is presence. It's the subtle art of unsettling without aggression. It disarms the aggressive, confuses the manipulative, and forces the arrogant to face their own noise. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This video is for the ones who always feel unheard, for those who exit conversations with the weight of things left unsaid, not because they lacked courage, but because no one truly listened. For the kind, the calm, the ones mistaken for weak because they choose peace over performance. Perhaps you've mistaken your silence for powerlessness, but today you will see that silence is your sharpest blade. The world thinks victory lies in having the last word, but real victory lies in not needing one. When you can walk away without reacting, when you can observe without engaging, when you can feel the pull to defend yourself and choose stillness instead, that is strength, that is control, that is mastery. So from here forward, we will redefine what it means to win. We'll explore how to outmaneuver chaos, dismantle manipulation, and reclaim your energy, not by raising your voice, but by lowering your need to be understood. Prepare to see silence in a new light, not as a lack of response, but as the most undeniable response. Let's begin. Number 2. The ego's game. Why do we feel the urgent need to respond, to correct, to prove ourselves right? Because deep down, we've been conditioned to believe that silence equals defeat, that if we don't defend the truth, we're allowing a lie to win. But the Stoics saw through this illusion. Marcus Aurelius warned, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to trouble yourself or lose your inner peace. And that's precisely where the ego fails. Behind our compulsion to argue is not courage, but fear. Fear of appearing weak, fear of being misunderstood. And behind that fear stands the ego, fragile, restless, constantly grasping for validation. When disagreement arises, the ego does not seek truth. It seeks control. It doesn't want clarity. It wants confirmation. It fears that if its ideas are shaken, its identity might crumble. That's why argument in this sense is rarely about wisdom. It becomes armor, a desperate attempt to preserve self-image. And what does that mean for us? It means that the very urge to justify, to explain, to win the debate, reveals that we've already lost. Because once you start playing by their rules, you've surrendered your center. Epictetus said, "If someone speaks badly of you, do not defend yourself against the accusations, but reply, 'He obviously did not know my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these.'" This is the Stoic mindset. It doesn't react, it reflects. It doesn't fight to be right, it rests in being rooted. Those who live by the opinions of others, those who strive constantly to be seen as good, as correct, as admirable, are trapped in what the Stoics called herd morality. It's the silent prison of performance, where your actions are no longer your own, but shaped by what others might think of them. True strength, however, is not the power to convince. It is the freedom to remain unmoved. It is holding your truth quietly, even in the face of laughter, rejection, or misunderstanding. It is mastering yourself when everyone else is losing control. Because the real battlefield is not the argument. It's the space within where you choose whether to react or remain sovereign. So, how do we influence others if we do not react? How do we project power without speaking? The answer lies not in domination, but in presence, in the silent authority of the individual who, like the Stoic sage, needs no audience to feel complete. In the next part, we will explore this archetype, not through theory, but through action, because from here on out, silence begins to speak. Number 3. The Stoic Master of Silence. Nature does not speak to the distracted, nor to those seeking applause. She reveals herself only to the few who dare to look inward, to the ones with the courage to confront their own restlessness, shed their illusions, and rise not by noise, but by stillness. While the common man lives shackled by opinions, customs, and the hunger for approval, there exists another kind of being, rare, unshakable, and inwardly free. The Stoics called him the sage. Not a man of high status or public acclaim, but one who has mastered himself so completely that the world no longer dictates his inner state. He does not react, he chooses. He does not seek to dominate others, but neither can he be dominated. And what is most striking? He often accomplishes all this in complete silence. The Stoic sage does not enter debates to win. He does not play emotional games. He doesn't prove, persuade, or defend. He observes. He waits. He speaks only when necessary, and even then, with precision, not performance. His silence is not a void. It is a declaration, a language beyond words, a presence that cannot be ignored. As Seneca once said, silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings. The silence of the sage is not passive, it is calculated. It does not seek to impress. It imposes respect. While others raise their voices, he raises his gaze. While they defend themselves with words, he dismantles their illusions through calm. His silence is a mirror, and those who look into it are often unsettled because they see their own noise staring back at them. In a society addicted to attention and outrage, the one who masters silence becomes a sovereign. His quiet is a fortress, not because he's hiding, but because he knows that every unnecessary word is a piece of power given away. Every reactive emotion is a window into weakness. And so, he speaks sparingly, not because he lacks something to say, but because he has nothing to prove. Epictetus reminds us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things. The Stoic does not depend on validation. That is why he is feared. Because nothing is more unsettling to the world than someone who cannot be moved by shame, praise, or threat. His silence is not escape, it is immunity, a shield against manipulation, an armor against emotional traps. And when he finally speaks, he does not explain, he declares. He does not ask for space. His presence takes it. His few words carry weight because they come from a place of stillness, not strategy. But this leads us to a deeper question. Why is such silence so disturbing to others? Why does a person saying nothing provoke more anxiety than one shouting in protest? Why does stillness ignite more fear than fury? The answer is not just philosophical, it is psychological. To understand the power of silence, we must understand the mental disarray it causes in those addicted to noise. We must understand how the calm of one man can unravel the entire emotional scaffolding of another. And that is exactly what we'll explore next. Number 4. Why silence unnerves people. Silence is not emptiness, it is a mirror, and what it reflects can be unbearable for many. When you choose not to react, not to explain, defend, or retaliate, you are not simply withholding words. You are stripping away the illusions that others cling to. Because most people do not speak to reveal truth, they speak to shield themselves from it. They fill silence with noise not to connect, but to protect, to defend their image, to silence their doubts, to avoid facing the terrifying gap between what they say and who they truly are. And that's why silence is so disarming. It removes their shield. Modern psychology confirms what Stoics sensed long before brain scans could validate it. In confrontational situations, silence is rarely perceived as neutrality. It is perceived as judgment. When you respond with silence, the other person doesn't feel heard. They feel seen. And being truly seen, without the comfort of your reaction, exposes their insecurities. The mind panics, the amygdala fires, fear rises, doubt whispers. Is he judging me? Did he see through me? Does he know I'm bluffing? And in that mental storm, your silence becomes a blade, not of aggression, but of revelation. It cuts not with sound, but with stillness. Epictetus once said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master," but the Stoic does not grant others such power. He knows that every word spoken in haste is a move surrendered. Every emotional outburst is a blueprint of your weakness handed to your opponent. This is why the Stoic chooses stillness, not as a retreat, but as a form of psychological warfare. He does not suppress his emotions. He rules over them. This silence is especially devastating to manipulators. These are the people who thrive on emotional control. They bait you, provoke you, hoping you'll react, because your reaction gives them leverage. But when you don't respond, when you remain grounded and unmoved, the entire game collapses. They panic, because without your response, they cannot calibrate, they cannot dominate, they cannot control. Even deeper, silence triggers old wounds, the unresolved traumas of rejection, invisibility, abandonment. In the quiet, the ego trembles. It realizes it is not the center, that its words hold no sway, that its presence does not move the earth. For those who are addicted to attention, this is unbearable. For those who build identity on approval, silence is annihilation. And so, when you withhold words, not out of fear, but out of mastery, you do more than protect your peace. You strike where it hurts the most, the illusion of self-importance. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Silence demands more strength than speech, because it denies you the immediate gratification of being understood. It resists the impulse to defend yourself, and it goes against everything society has conditioned you to do: explain, perform, justify. But that is precisely why silence is powerful, because it is not instinct, it is intention, it is control. The Stoic sage is not silent because he lacks courage. He is silent because he possesses more of it than the world can comprehend. And in that silence, he communicates everything that words fail to express: clarity, authority, and the untouchable peace of a man who no longer needs to react. Number 5. Silence as a strategic weapon. Now that you understand how silence affects the minds of others, how it triggers insecurity, dissolves defenses, and exposes illusion, it is time to rise above mere understanding. It is time to wield silence, not as passive resistance, but as a conscious and devastating form of command. From this point forward, silence is no longer a shield. It becomes your blade, a precise weapon forged not in the desire to wound, but in the mastery of restraint. The first principle is brutal in its simplicity. Stay silent when your ego screams to respond. That moment, when you are burning to justify, to explain, to win, is the very moment you must remain still, because that urge is not strength. It is submission in disguise. It reveals you still seek validation, that you still want others to see your side, and in doing so, you hand them your power. True silence begins when you no longer feel the need to be understood. Seneca said, "He who does not want much is the richest." Likewise, the man who no longer needs to be right, to be heard, to be praised, he is untouchable. The second discipline is observation. In the noise of others, you sharpen your perception, but you don't listen like one waiting for a turn to speak. You listen like a strategist in the fog of war, watching, waiting, absorbing. Every contradiction, every slip, every fear masked as arrogance, you gather it. And when you speak, if you speak, it is not conversation, it is precision. A single sentence, clean and cutting, because you already know the terrain of their mind better than they do. The third principle is time. Learn to let silence breathe. The longer the pause, the more weight it carries. In those seconds of stillness, others fall apart. They interpret, they imagine, they spiral. Their minds become their own worst enemies. And in that space, you say nothing, because nothing needs to be said. Be silent, Marcus Aurelius advised, unless what you are about to say is better than silence. The fourth is unpredictability. When your words are rare, your silence becomes loaded. People begin to fear what they cannot predict. They tread carefully, measure their tone, second-guess their assumptions. You shift from reactive to magnetic. You become the gravitational center of the conversation, calm, still, impenetrable. But let this be clear. This silence is not passive. It is not weakness. This is not submission dressed in stillness. The Stoics never endorsed timidity. This is active, charged silence, a poised stillness, like the draw of an archer before the arrow flies. It is not avoidance, it is discipline. And when the moment is right, when the silence has spoken louder than noise, then, and only then, do you release your words. Not to argue, not to fight, but to conclude. One phrase, one truth. Not shouted, but felt so deeply that the conversation ends not with applause, but with realization. Yet here lies the danger, because silence, like all tools of power, can be corrupted. When used unconsciously, it becomes a cage, a silent scream, a mask for submission. There are those who think they are stoic when in truth they are silent because they've been broken. Their silence is not choice, it is surrender. And that we must expose. Because someone may be building an empire on your silence, and while you think you're avoiding conflict, you may be giving away your life. In the next part, we will shine light into that shadow. You'll learn how to recognize the moment when silence is no longer strength, but self-erasure. And the Stoics already saw it coming. Number 6. When silence becomes surrender. Is there anything more dangerous than being silenced? Yes, being taught that silence is your only option, that suppressing your frustration, avoiding confrontation, and conceding in the name of maturity is somehow noble. That silence is always a sign of balance. But what if it's not? What if this silence isn't wisdom, but quiet surrender? Stoic philosophy warns us not to confuse stillness with weakness. Not all silence is virtue. Sometimes it is a mask, worn by those who have been conditioned to believe that self-erasure is a moral high ground. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And a good man, a strong man, does not vanish beneath the weight of false harmony. He does not allow his calmness to become a canvas upon which others paint their will. Have you noticed how certain people thrive in your stillness? How your capacity to avoid conflict becomes their gateway to control? They take your silence as consent, your restraint as weakness, your peace as permission. They push, you yield. They occupy space, you retreat. And you convince yourself it's not worth the fight. But here's the truth. Every time you swallow your voice for the sake of false peace, you pay a price. And over time, that price is your identity. Epictetus taught, "If you want to be free, don't wish for things to happen as you want. Wish for things to happen as they do, and accept your power over how you respond." But when your response is always silence, especially silence rooted in fear, you are no longer responding. You are submitting. This isn't the stillness of mastery. It's the paralysis of domestication. The Stoics spoke of the herd mind, a morality designed not to elevate the strong, but to pacify the many. It tells you to play small, to yield, to comply, and then it applauds your restraint, even as it erases you. But the Stoic path is not one of erasure. It is a return to essence. To become sovereign over yourself is not to dominate others. It is to no longer be ruled by fear, by guilt, by the need to be liked. True silence does not apologize for existing. It does not step aside to keep the peace. It stands unmoved because it has nothing left to prove. That is the silence nature respects. Not the silence that surrenders, but the silence that transforms tension without a single word. And yet, the question remains, how do we break free from this submissive silence? How do we stop being used without even knowing we are being used? The answer lies in the final evolution of the Stoic ideal, not the Übermensch, but the self-master, the one who does not wait to be heard, but whose silence is already felt, the one who speaks only when the truth demands, and never to justify his worth. In the final chapter, you will uncover what it means to embody this presence, because the world does not need more voices screaming for attention. It needs more individuals who have mastered their silence and rule with it. Number 7. Silence as identity. We've arrived at the final step. And now, understand this with absolute clarity. Silence is not emptiness. It is not weakness. It is not a gap between words. True silence is presence, the unmistakable mark of someone who no longer reacts to the world, but reshapes it by simply existing. Nature, as the Stoics taught, was never meant for those who merely endure. It favors those who choose to rise above, to peel away the layers of pretense, even when it hurts. The silence of the Stoic is not the silence of fear or guilt. It is not the silence of the oppressed. It is the stillness of one who has already conquered within. A man who has no need to explain himself because he knows who he is. And more importantly, he knows what he refuses to become. Now ask yourself, how many times have you remained quiet, not from strength, but from fear of conflict, from guilt, from wanting to be liked? How often have you surrendered your voice so others could walk freely across your truth? Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And if your silence is stained with shame, it is not noble, it is betrayal. From this moment forward, your silence must no longer be an escape. It must become a boundary, a declaration, a force. You do not need to be understood. You need to be, and that takes courage. If you're ready, affirm it. I choose the silence that commands respect. Say it below, not for validation, but to claim your place. Because even in silence, your words can move mountains, when spoken from mastery. And remember, the weak shout, the strong remain silent, the wise choose when. Silence, when rooted in strength, doesn't hide who you are, it reveals it. If what you've just learned resonated with you, then you already know. The most powerful presence doesn't need to shout. It just is. If you're ready to walk that path, calm, deliberate, unshaken, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And in the comments, write "Power in Silence," not just for me, but as a quiet vow to yourself. You're not here to be louder, you're here to be clearer. And the next chapter will take you deeper into that truth.